Gary.
Yeah, so they got CM Punk now.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
On July 9th, 1776, just hours after the Declaration of Independence is first read to the Army of New York, secures Britain's global empire and the benefits of trade for English people.
At the commencement of the war between you and the French, you asked for our assistance. You told us often that if we took a quick action against the French, that you would move them off our land.
They make peace after Britain agrees to protect their lands. English colonists, having helped defeat the French, viewed Indian lands as chaos cause of war. But the Indians had Unitedstates proclamation of 1765 sets a western boundary.
These united colonies ought to be free and independent states, absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
I see no wisdom in a Declaration of Independence, nor any purpose to be answered by it.
Those opposed speak from deeply held principles. They plead for more time, hoping that despite the open warfare that's already broken out, the colonies can still reckon. Word is that a massive British fleet carrying thousands of soldiers is bearing down the Europe. Returning to the British colonies. Is the ascension of the Europeans of modern
Then it's another opportunity to talk about, like, hey, she's doing a lot of work for the Army, probably, if she's accompanying them everywhere. Why, what that work would have been. And then, of course, we have the guys dressed up in the outfits we've seen soldiers dressed up in. That one's a bit more obvious. But yeah, that's a good one that you can ask here to kind of help drive you.
But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and God.
That wasn't all that far from where we're standing right now. I think what to kind of set things up, kind of like where the Army is at. The Army has a really bad go of it in New York. It's probably an indefensible location. If Washington really just wanted to preserve his forces and actually like fight in such a way that he could defeat the British, he probably should have just withdrawn completely and given up the city. But you can imagine the morale effect that would have had for people living in and around the area. So he feels like he has to kind of put up a defense, but it probably goes worse than he expects. So by the time that New York campaign is over, the British have kind of outmaneuvered them, and they've lost so many soldiers to casualties, through desertion, and due to enlistments running out, because enlistments at that time could be only 3 months sometimes, maybe 6 months or a year. So you can imagine after experiencing that campaign, the remaining soldiers whose enlistments are about to end, they think like, what do you think they want to do? They want to stick around? Yeah, this is,
Stop loss.
yeah, a few months ago they were British subjects, and they don't really know the outcome of the war. We all have the benefit of understanding what happened, but to them, like, the British Empire was the most powerful on the planet. So like after that experience, a lot of them don't re-enlist. But there's about 3,000 soldiers of the original 15,000 that he starts with in that New York campaign. And a lot of their enlistments are expiring in about 10 days. And Washington pleads with his soldiers. He says, please give me 10 more days to salvage the war here, because if you go home now, all the loss, all the heartache, all the things you've suffered through in the past couple months will have all been for nothing. We'll go right back to square one, and frankly, we're not going to be equal subjects in the British Empire once we kind of give up. So those 10 days, he says, I'm going to try and eke out some victories so that people can believe again. We're going to kind of try and reinvigorate the cause. So some associators from Pennsylvania, from Philadelphia, kind of give an influx of troops and gives him kind of the extra kind of power he needs to try and win some battles. The two battles that a lot of people are familiar with that kind of help turn the tide, and the first one is most people are familiar with, is the crossing at Trenton. And this wall kind of helps illustrate it here. So he has this plan. He wants there to be 3 crossings, but only one group makes it across. It's his. And they split up and they march down and they try to attack this Hessian garrison, some German-born soldiers who are fighting on behalf of the crown. And they're effectively able to ambush them. Even though a lot of things in the plan don't go that well. He expects them to all get there before sunrise. They don't. They march many miles. Some soldiers are dropping dead because of exhaustion, because of the freezing cold temperatures. And a lot of them are worried they're not going to have the element of surprise because the sun is up now. But they're able to actually get to Trenton, and they do capture those Hessian soldiers. Now Washington also knows that up there's a bigger British army. He expects an immediate counterattack, so he immediately actually comes back across the river. A lot of people don't realize that. So he takes some of those prisoners with him, leaves, and then he realizes, like, oh, okay, maybe they're not. Maybe I can just hang on to Trenton. That's going to be pretty cool. But you can see some of the remnants of kind of the Hessian soldiers are trying to get out of there, and they realize, all right, we're not going to catch up to them. So at that point, British up in Princeton, they're alerted, they know what's going on, and Washington kind of switches gears here. And he's actually going to come up into Trenton. The British are going to come down, and there's some skirmishers there, just trying to kind of slow them down, harass them, and do that all the way down into Trenton. So there's a second battle at Trenton, this time between George Washington's Continental Army and the British forces that are coming from Princeton. This is going to be a heads-up battle, but at the end of the day, they end up kind of splitting the city. They've got, the Americans have one half, the British have one half, and they're on either side of this bridge, either side of this river. And he realizes, I can't actually defeat this force. So what he realizes is, I can beat that army up there. So he withdraws in the middle of the night. They keep the campfires burning to make it seem as though everybody's still there. And as the army leaves and the sun rises, they realize that the Continental Army is gone. But they march up and they fight the British Army at Princeton and defeat that force, which is more comparable to their own. And those two victories kind of reignite or reinvigorate the revolutionary cause. The other benefit here is you see the British Army chasing him up north. He's leading them away from what important city? Trenton. And what is across the river? What other important city? The capital at this point. You're standing in it. Philadelphia. Yeah. He leads them away from Philadelphia. So he accomplishes two important objectives. He wins some battles, gets people to believe again, and he also helps protect the city of Philadelphia. So that's the story of Trenton. It's a long road ahead, but it's a pivotal turning moment because as we kind of try to illustrate here in this gallery where we ask you the question, how did the revolution survive its darkest hour? The truth is the revolution almost got killed in the cradle. If that hadn't have gone right, or if people had just said, we're not in it to win it anymore, when he asked the soldiers to kind of stick around for 10 more days, probably would have been it, because there would have been nobody left to oppose the British. That's kind of the story of Trenton, but there's also an interesting kind of human story of an officer in the Continental Army who gives up his life in the Battle of Princeton, kind of the end there. So at that battle, there's this big, imposing Continental Army officer that a lot of the British soldiers see, and who do you think they presume it might be? Yeah, they're like, all right, George Washington, I've heard of that guy, he's big and tall, he's on the battlefield waving a sword around, he's commanding everybody. If we capture him or kill him, like, that's gonna be it. You know, we're gonna kind of chop off the head of the snake. So some soldiers kind of do a bayonet charge, they surround this officer, and he refuses their offer of surrender, or their demand of surrender. And he tries to defend himself, he goes down swinging with this sword right here. Unfortunately, you can imagine this bayonet attached to like a musket. It's going to have a lot more reach. That sword is not going to do a whole lot of good. So he does not win that conflict. So he gets run through with a bayonet many times by those soldiers who are opposing him. It's not George Washington. It's a guy named Hugh Mercer, who was a general who was kind of in support of Washington, helped plan this series of battles right here. So he was a valued member of Washington's kind of general staff. It's a blow to him, but you know, he gives up his life for the cause. I think what I like most about this is kind of the human story and the fact that we can put this in Hugh Mercer's hands as he kind of gave up his life on the battlefield. And you mind stepping forward a little bit? Can you try and read some of the inscription there on the bayonet?
C14, T7, IR?
Yeah, so C14 would have been like Company 14. And then 17R. It's like the R actually has like 2 bars, like for the tall part. So that's the 17th Regiment of Foot. And that is the same regiment that bayoneted Hugh Mercer. So we, of course, I mean, that's many, many soldiers. We don't know if those are one of the ones that is responsible for his demise. But it's kind of wild to imagine these objects from hundreds of years ago now being reunited like this together. So, you know, his is just one of many sacrifices that helps kind of the American cause stay alive at this moment during the war. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, that's...
French guns to win a decisive victory at Saratoga, a victory that convinces France and the United States that together they can defeat Great Britain. American diplomats in France are also most notably Benjamin Franklin. Franklin understands the king's desire to lead the British and the French court's attraction to American ideas. Plays both beautifully. Franklin deliberately shapes his image to embody the French notion of the quintessential American, a man of natural simplicity, social equality, religious freedom, and rustic life. European powers to support America. Spain joins France in its fight against Great Britain. The Netherlands declares war on Britain. 8 European nations form the League of Armed Neutrality to defend themselves against the British.
General Washington fires the first one. In 3 weeks of brutal combat, the French and American forces approached the British.
By 1789,
show without resistance.
For all involved, it is totally wrong. There's no distinction between civilians and combatants. Women take up arms. Children are victims. A racial dimension to the fighting intensifies acts of savagery by all sides and sets a pattern of racial violence that will persist throughout America's westward expansion.
Peace with them, so the whole of the western tribes are driven over the Mississippi and the lakes, entirely beyond the American lines.
In Paris, treaty negotiations are underway. In England, the king will not concede defeat, but Prime Minister Hires is now global. General Washington is north of New York City. So is French General Count Rochambeau with a force of about 4,000 French troops.
Words that would change the world rang out from this thing.
I'm gonna use the rest of it.